So it sure has been almost a hot 2 years since Meg and I have done a podcast. Our last one pretty much just entailed a review of the Super Mario Bros. Movie review. So that was pretty cool. The Zelda trivia one didn't really count because it was just mixed in with my last Zelda Gauntlet that I did, primarily in the Wind Waker HD, because Ocarina of Time, I don't think that I was able to find one that was good enough to reach episode 28, because that's normally what the lore is with my Zelda walkthroughs, but sadly that did not end up happening, so rip Ocarina of Time. It was still a good series, a good one, but hey, we are here. Also, it's been a good while since the very first one we did in 2021, where we discussed some very interesting things, but most importantly, a rematch of Super Mario Galaxy 2 Versus. So I just want to take time and thank everyone who tuned in to that rematch, and thanks to my current crew for even making that possible. And honestly, if it weren't for that one comment that I got back in 2019, or in that neighborhood of the year era, on a particular video that I did, I forgot which one, I personally don't think that rematch would have happened. So again, thanks to everyone who watched and tuned into that. It means a ton to us, really, to the rest of the competitors that I participated with. So, Mega, do you have any say on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys for coming out to see the Galaxy 2 Versus rematch as well. I know Max's audience has grown since we had last done that. We've also grown both as people and as players of that game, so some new and exciting challenges came from the Galaxy 2 Versus, and I remember my answer whenever you had asked me in that first podcast we did if I saw Galaxy 2 Rematch happening, and my answer was, well...
We weren't sure. We weren't sure at all, but we definitely got an answer in a good few years later on. As time passed, we were able to find out what we were capable of getting away with and our availability and whatsoever. But it worked out for the meanwhile.
Yeah, we ended up making it happen, and as you said, even though we haven't done podcast on this channel for about almost a year and a half at this point, but it's still been one every year since we started these in 2021, so we kept that tradition going, assuming this is still coming out in December.
If I really want to be technical about it, I would have to edit it pretty quick and release it this year before New Year's Eve, but hey, it is what it is. It's the thought that counts.
True.
Kind of like that know-it-all kid from the Polar Express. It's the thought that counts. Anyway, I will not bring him up.
Well, see ya.
Man,
no, I gotta save that for the end here.
Speaking of, I know that we were gonna dive into another topic, but I just want to say, with the holiday season coming up, I've watched that movie for the 10,000th time. So the way that I usually do it is just, I'll get whatever friend that I want to watch it with, and him and I, or her and I, will, depending on who I'm watching it with, we'll try to find out the flaws and mistakes that were just kind of inadvertently added into the film, which are not really bad, I would say, but it's just noticeable to the person watching. But that's just kind of what I do.
Yeah, that's typically just called riffing. It's one of the things that I like to do with my friends whenever I introduce them to the movie The Room, which is infamously bad, and it's not one that you watch because it's a legitimately good movie. It's something that you watch to make fun of.
I mean, in this day and age, when you have an audience of movies, they can just riff, do whatever they want, and it's just not even considered an insult. It's just them giving their honest opinion, per se. But hey, primarily on this time of year, there are so many Christmas films that I watched or do still watch to this day, the Santa Claus with Tim Allen, Elf with Will Ferrell, and other things like that. But
The Muppet Christmas Carol is one of my personal favorites.
Yeah. Anywho, since this is a season of giving, and we're being holly and jolly, what is our first topic here? I noticed that you wanted to chime in on some remakes here, so what did you have in mind for that?
Yeah, I guess if I can go ahead and give a little bit of background, I don't remember exactly when. It was probably fall of last year, Alex was actually kind of bouncing some ideas off of me as to what we wanted this next podcast to be, which we didn't do one in fall of, or winter of last year, but we kind of like just pushed it back to eventually doing it now. But at the time, he had brought up the idea of making the major topic be talking about the Super Mario RPG remake that had released in 2023. And I wasn't really sure if we could do like a whole... I wasn't really sure if we could do like a whole podcast on that. But then, out of the blue, and then to my great joy, The Thousand Year Door, my favorite game of all time, got a remake. So, eventually we went back to the drawing board. I'm just like, you know, a lot of remakes have come out in the last several years, and I think we could dedicate a podcast almost exclusively to that. So, that's the theme of this podcast after the opening acknowledgments, is we're going to be talking about various game remakes, remasters, reimaginings, ports, all that kind of thing. So, if I can kind of outline what kind of things we're talking about, on my list I have games with new content, but the regular game is mostly the same. Games that have an all-new campaign built off of the engine of the original. I have games with upgraded visuals and no new additions aside from controls, so most ports would fall under this category. And reimaginings where a game is based on a previously existing game, but it's been built from the ground up, essentially.
Yeah,
so
I would assume that in an original make of any title, like example, this is like, I know that I kind of touch up on it a lot, for me at least, but the Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword for the Wii, when it was released in 2011, I think most people really didn't start picking a bone with it until like 2021, when the Switch port came out, and it fixed so much of the complaints that people really complained about. Example, not having like free camera control to see where a certain object was. What else? I think in a segment of Bamboo Island, you would have to like you would have to be obliged to use motion control to get a good 37 cut like the guy wants you to, and you'll get a collectible for it. But in the Switch version, as I pointed out in episode 1, I believe, of my current walkthrough, you have the option to use buttons only or motion, so it's not like you're obliged to like just use one way of control. You have availability and accessibility to yourself as a person. And what else? I want to say more came out in the Mario RPG remake, like more accessibility of the breezy difficulty, sound player modes, and that kind of jazz. But what are some that you wanted to touch up on?
Yeah, I guess if I can talk about the Skyward Sword one briefly. I mean, there isn't a whole lot of reason to talk about Skyward Sword since your Let's Play is still going on right now. But what's funnily enough is whenever the Skyward Sword... it's called Skyward Sword HD officially, right?
Yeah.
I was actually thinking, like, maybe a day or two before it was officially announced, I was thinking to myself at work, like, they could totally remake Skyward Sword for the Switch and it would be doable, because I was justifying it as you could just use the Joy-Cons as the motion controls, but I don't think I would have predicted that they would make it, or map things to button and analog stick controls as well. Or essentially re-implementing the traditional control scheme in there. So, yeah, that one kind of caught me by surprise.
Yeah, in a sense, like, when you're playing the game in general, like, if you're coming across a specific task, like, again, Bamboo Island, in another good section, like, just having to scale walls, which I've been told that I was pretty good at back in 2023, in a particular gauntlet that I will not say that in a game where you turn into a wolf, where you have to go and save the world from a big tall man with red hair. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah,
No, absolutely. You should be an expert in scaling walls here. Remember, we did the Spider-Man minigame earlier.
And you gotta get the
It's Okami!
I was gonna talk about Twilight Princess, but you're on the right track. But yeah, Skyward Sword now, in its HD version, does just give you so much, just, magical accessibility. And that's just one of them. But in RPG, though, I wanted to talk about specifically something called, I want to say Storage Box, because looking in it, the journal includes a monster list which acts as a guide for all the monsters you've encountered and sound player that lets you listen to the original and newly arranged music. And
Which, by the way, that needs to be a staple in every single remake ever.
it should, because it adds so much to the remake. It adds so much just, like to a vibe sense and that sort of, aspect. And I guess if you wanted to, you could touch up more on the newly arranged soundtrack for Thousand Year Door, because I did notice a good difference.
Yes, there are. Admittedly, I could kind of take or leave the new soundtrack. I don't think anything sounds like generally worse. I do really like the remixed battle themes, but when it comes to like the overworld themes, I don't know. I think I prefer the original, but like I said, that's not to say that the new soundtrack is bad. I could just kind of like take it or leave it. But I am very thankful that they do have a badge in the game that costs 0 BP, and you can get it very early on, called Nostalgic Sounds. That, funnily enough, the badge is actually shaped like a GameCube. You turn that on, and boom, you have the game's original soundtrack, except for cutscenes that have all new songs made for them. Like, whenever each of your partners joins you, they actually have a specific character theme now. So if it was a new song, like you're meeting Koops for the first time and he's joining you, then Koops' theme would play there.
Right, and I think by the time that, whichever time code this is in the video that we're doing now, I think the title theme of the Thousand Year Door remake would be playing some... I don't know, maybe I can jumble them up, maybe I can just kind of like put them in whatever order, but again, I would say the Thousand Year Door has a good, like, solid remake of a soundtrack, regardless.
It really is. There are so many good quality of life improvements, and if I can bring up the elephant in the room, yes, I'm still working on the Let's Play. I'm finishing it as the GameCube original, and I've actually already taken so many notes about the remake. I know of the new things that have been added, such as a few additional boss fights. I haven't fought them yet myself. I'm actually waiting to get to that point in the Let's Play, because the very last episode or two, depending on how I want to split it up exactly, but some of the last videos that you're going to see of the Thousand Year Door for me are going to be talking about the remake. And I'll be going over the remake's specific new additions. I know, like, just before we hit record, Alex and I were talking about a few of them. He brought up the idea of the partner ring, which allows you to switch to your partners in like the blink of an eye, and it's very convenient rather than having to outright pause the game.
Yeah, because it says here you have to basically manually pause and go to the tab in the menu, and then cycle through. It's especially, I want to say, mid-battle as well, or did that occur in, like, battles, or just in general?
Well, within battles, you have the option to switch out your partner, depending on whether or not you have the quick change badge on. That would waste a turn. But, I mean, that's not really an inconvenience within battle itself. I think it was mainly just the overworld stuff that people had that issue with. The main thing that I'm glad that they really fixed was, one of the biggest criticisms I've heard Thousand Year Door get is that it's very backtrack heavy. They have really taken some steps to alleviate that by incorporating a room that basically has fast travel to every single major chapter area. And on top of that, chapters that were already backtrack heavy from the start, like Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, they actually have very convenient things like a springboard that'll take you up the cliff in the Keelhaul Key jungle, and there is a return pipe to Twilight Town from Creepy Steeple. So that one at least cuts down one round trip during Chapter 4, which is really nice.
Yeah,
but I don't want to completely exhaust all of my topics on Thousand Year Door, just because then I wouldn't have anything to talk about during the actual videos on my channel. But those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I mean, I've never really played 1,000 Year Door. I would love to. I hear that it's like really anticipated as a release in general, not just the Switch version, but the GameCube as well. A lot of people...
You have a very good chance to get it now.
Yeah, and most people that I know just kind of stuck with GameCube for a while, since it's, it's that touch of originality, and without it, we would not be here with a remake. I gotta say though, the soundtrack to me like stuck out the most, since I, again, never got to play the game, but you can definitely hear a good difference in the music. But I do have to say, and this is not throwing shade at 1,000 Year Door, but the Glitz Pit, man. Why? I honestly do not agree with the remaster. I would very much prefer the original. I still have it as my ringtone today, whenever somebody gives me a call. But if there's anything that I would, kind of change and tweak about the remake, I would definitely kind of remaster the Glitz Pit theme, the main one.
Yeah, I think the song during Chapter 3 that I was kind of the most disappointed in terms of remix music was Rockhawk's theme. I think I prefer the original there.
Yeah, in most aspects, it's basically, I know this isn't really remake entailed, but just like with Galaxy 1 and Galaxy 2, like people would have preferred Melty Molten or Melty Monster Galaxy. It really just does depend on you as a person. So, again, you as the viewer, whoever's watching, would you prefer a good remaster or a solid, just, sticking to the originality? It's up to you. Personally, I don't have a good pick between Galaxy 1 and 2, because remake or not, the music is just stunning in general. Like, even if Melty Monster was a first time remake and remaster, they put thought into it. It's really hard music to write. And again, I've gotten to see the work behind the scenes that Miyamoto was able to put together with his orchestra, and have them compose like on set and like record it for the game itself. It really does just kind of stick out in general. So I admire that.
Yeah, I did have 3D All-Stars on my list of things to talk about. We can go into other things about it later, but in terms of music, when it comes to Galaxy, I don't really think there's much reason to redo the music from Galaxy specifically. One, because it was already a live orchestra, so I don't think they could have gone much bigger with it. And two, yeah, it was pretty much perfect the way it was.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And if I had my way, I would probably put the music from, I want to say, Toy Time Galaxy, which is like kind of just a throwback to Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES, for the most part. But what else? I want to say, I forgot. I should know this as the music enthusiast that I am in many aspects, but I want to say Bowie Bass or Battle Rock. I think it's Battle Rock. That wasn't really a theme added into 2 as well. I just think that was mainly in Galaxy 1. It would have been nice to have it in the sequel, though.
Yeah, I don't think that song made it into Galaxy 2 at all. I know some of the original Galaxy 1 songs made it into World S.
Right. And honestly, if I had to pick my favorite, world theme, I would definitely pick 3. Since it's probably going to be in the list of songs that'll be in this video in the background. But definitely World 3. I want to say World S
Fair
too,
enough.
because World S just kind of did give a good closing to the game, especially with Grandmaster Galaxy and the Gusty Garden bring back. But yeah, you can hear it very slow in the background. It is Gusty Garden. But yeah,
I guess you had brought up earlier, you had mentioned the Super Mario RPG remake. I haven't played it myself, but was there anything specific you wanted to talk about it?
I would probably pick just standard user interface and menu improvements, since it's kind of what's on the forum here. It says here, again, I never got to play it since I... you know me. I'm very late to the party sometimes, but I just ended up getting and acquiring and, obtaining a Switch back in October or September, late September. But I would probably touch up a lot on just standard user interface, And it says here, apart from graphical improvements, the remake provides quality of life changes to system menus and combat user interface. Character's health, HP bar, and flower point count are now visible at the bottom of the screen at all times instead of only showing up when it's the player's turn for easy tracking. So yeah, in a good sense, I was just gonna say, like, in a good sense, it does reach out to the player and what they want to be able to accomplish. And I guess my last major one I would talk about is tricks and exploits that have been removed. This is number 12 on the list. It says here that invincibility stars have an exploit that allows you to easily gain experience and levels when you spot one in the SNES version of Super Mario RPG. Exploits like these were removed in the remake to allow for balanced gameplay progression. So, in a way, they patched most of the exploits that you were able to take advantage of in the SNES. So
I don't think, to my memory, I don't think that they patched out the one, which, to be fair, I think this one was left in there on purpose. I don't know if it's necessarily an exploit, but, like, how familiar are you with the original Mario RPG?
Okay, because I didn't really feel like I answered the question, so this is like a re-record just for the sake of this edit. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have that much experience with the original RPG, except when I was 15, all I really did was rewatch the playthroughs of the Forest Maze, which is the most popular part in the game, in my honest perspective, because it was the most rewatched and most replayed chapter in that era before the remake even happened. That, and I just noticed that during the cutscenes, there really is no dialogue whatsoever in the remake. Now, in the original, there are barely any cutscenes, so the remake does take care of that, and the music just makes up for the lack of dialogue that there is most of the time. So that's really the experience that I have with it.
For things, I know that they did add the ability to rematch certain bosses, which I think is a cool idea. You had brought up the user interface during battle. You can actually switch out what members there are of your party, which is nice. You couldn't do that in the original, at least not mid-battle. You can only do that like within the menu screen outside of battle. So maybe that's what you were thinking of when we were talking about Thousand Year Door earlier, but that was really nice. The thing that I was going to ask about, if you knew, and again, I don't think this is necessarily an exploit because it was in the original, I believe on purpose, but Geno actually has a special attack called Geno Whirl, and if you use it in the original and you press Y as the action command as like the last ring of Geno Whirl exits the screen, then Geno does 9,999 damage.
Yeah.
And I want to say that's in this. I want to say that's in the remake.
I think so too. Honestly, for poops and giggles, I'm going to go ahead and have a look. This may be a jump cut, but give me one sec. It says here that 9,999 of the whirl still works in the remake.
I think it's only for regular enemies, though. I don't think you can use it on... I don't think it works on bosses, unless maybe... Exor?
That's saying Exor for me.
But yeah, so you can't completely cheese things, but like most regular enemies it would take out.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of cheesing, I haven't really gotten there yet, but I just wanted to point out that I've seen some players of Zelda chilling on the baseline and kind of commenting about this. But in this particular section, when you access the sand ship in Skyward Sword and go back to Skyloft when Fledge is just kind of chilling in front of the sparring hall, that pumpkin throwing minigame is just the worst, and it kind of gives me like the goosebumps and the heebie-jeebies when I do it. But you could just aim right in front of him when he throws the pumpkin.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, I've personally done it myself.
Yeah, you don't need to wait.
And it has not failed me. It doesn't matter on the remake or Wii. Like, you can just still... This isn't really me touching up on differences between the two versions. This is just like me talking about cheesing in general.
So we've talked a lot about the Mario and Sonic remake, or sorry, not. We've talked a lot about the Mario and Zelda remakes so far in this podcast. But what do you say we branch out? I had a Freudian slip because it was my next topic. But what do you think about Sonic Colors?
It's not bad. I haven't really given it too much insight, given the fact that I have only played Generations and Heroes on the PS3 and the standard GameCube. I'm old. I'm an oldie. I'm a crusty old vet from the 2001 era. But I mean, I like what I'm seeing here in the Colors edition.
Yeah, I want to say Colors, which wasn't exclusively for the Wii, it was multi-platform. I think the Wii probably had the most like technical problems. I hope that they patched those out eventually, but the Sonic Colors remake, I think, introduced a new Wisp called the Void Wisp, and it also featured rival battle races with Metal Sonic. So like kind of like a time trial type thing, I believe.
Yeah, and it also states that the file select screen, in my opinion, or in my honest perspective, does not exist any longer. I think they took it out.
I think the original Sonic Colors had like a file select screen that had like, wasn't it something ridiculous like 16 different save files?
Yeah, it was there.
I could be making that up.
It reminded me of, I want to say, it really does remind me of Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII on the PSP back when I played it. You can have the option to just save as many times as you want, and wherever you want, but it has to be in a specific location. Kind of like with the bird statues in Skyward Sword. I know that I kind of use that game as a good example, and I do it kind of many times, but it is kind of correlating.
Let me see. I had two more games that I wanted to talk about in terms of games that were remade that are mostly the same but have some new content. One that I picked up like just about a month or two ago, well, not physically, I bought it digitally, is Ducktales Remastered. Well, essentially it was made by Capcom, and then it got remade in 2013, I believe, with like this brand new art style of like official, like very nice vectorized and clean line art, and it looks just like the animated series. I will say the title DuckTales Remastered is a little bit misleading because I suppose I should probably define what I would consider a remaster. So, remaster would, to me, is just like upgraded visuals, and then, but I actually consider DuckTales Remaster more of a reimagining, where it's something that's, for the most part, built from the ground up with like an all-new engine, which it has. DuckTales Remastered has the same level design for the most part, but the NES version, if you knew where to go, you could actually just go right to the end of a stage. You didn't really have to explore the whole thing. There are different like plot MacGuffins and things within the stages that you need to pick up within DuckTales Remastered in order to actually proceed. Like I'll use the Amazon stages as a perfect example. You have to actually go around the entire stage and pick up these different like amulet coins to put into this Indiana Jones like relic, and then it would open up the rest of the stage to you. Whereas in the NES version, you could just go past that and then ride the helicopter with Launchpad, and he would take you right to the boss. So that's kind of a cool change. And I know some people maybe aren't as crazy about all the cutscenes since that game is fully voice acted. To me, I really like the cutscenes. It feels like an episode of the show. But there is also the option after you complete the game once, I believe you can turn them off. And you can always just press start and hit skip cinematic anyway, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, DuckTales Remastered is a great game. Not necessarily a remaster, but, you know, DuckTales Remake actually doesn't sound as good of a title, so it might have just been for branding.
Yeah, I guess you could say that version of DuckTales kind of rocks us. That is not a Kingdom Hearts reference. Yeah.
Uncle Scrooge is in Kingdom Hearts, though.
What I generally will say is that the NES version of DuckTales like kind of gives me like a good standard like Mega Man kind of vibe with that screen outlay for sure. I want to say though the remake, I'll like kind of share a good example cutscene with Louis here. This 60 frames per second is just magical. I mean, look at this cutscene. It kind of takes away from, again, the Mega Man vibe that you get in the original, but I gotta say, the fact that you can just read like this and not have to read on the top of the screen most part where dialogue is, based upon my experience as far as my knowledge goes, but it's just pretty good. It's pretty good, and you're pretty much set if you want a remake.
All right. I guess one final game in the realm of games that are mostly the same but with some new content is Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Or Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, I should say. Where that game, aside from like having a new art style that's kind of, I guess, more like pastel based, maybe like a little bit more cell shading involved, but the core game is mostly the same. I think they redesigned King Dedede, which admittedly I'm not really that big a fan of King Dedede's redesign. I prefer, like, I think the gold standard for the way King Dedede should look is Smash Bros.
Smash Bros. Brawl. That was the main one.
And Kirby Superstar, I think he looked great there too. I like King Dedede with like the big eyes and the big pupils.
Yeah.
And I think that they shrunk his pupils quite a bit, and I'm not really that big a fan of his proportions there. I think he looked fine in the original.
Definitely.
But they also added the Merry Magaland, which featured a bunch of like Kirby mini games over the years, all in one place, and you could play them for different achievements with like the stamp rally. And on top of that, this would also even kind of segue nicely into my next topic. Games that are remakes that feature an all-new campaign built off of the same engine as the original. You have Magolor's Epilogue, where after he's defeated in Kirby's Return to Dreamland, you could play as Magolor and see how he made it back into the series continuity, since we all thought for a long time that he canonically died during the final battle of Kirby's Return to Dreamland. In fact, we even commented on it in our Let's Play on TheGamer'sGarage.
So since the ending of the last episode, we've actually taken on part-time work as a traffic light, but we're not very good at our jobs because only once is really the right color. I'm not quite red enough to be a stoplight, and people just get confused when they see my brother.
And funnily enough, we did that Let's Play, and like maybe 2 months later, they announced that remake, and I texted Watcha, I'm like, yeah, so you think we should have waited?
I'm sure his response,
but, it ended up being
pretty humble.
It ended up being a fun series. We have talked about maybe, this is a hard maybe at some point in the future we'll go back and record new episodes, since I believe my brother, actually, he enjoyed playing Return to Dreamland so much that after the remake was announced, he ended up picking that up, since the copy we played was Watcha's. So if we do need to show off any of the new content, like the new copy abilities and Merry Magaland, then we could do that. It might potentially be fun to... I'm just now thinking of this. If they have some kind of co-op in Magolor's Epilogue, maybe Watcha and my bro and I could make that a Gamer's Garage project.
Yeah,
and it's not leaking the project because we haven't talked about it yet, Watcha.
We have not talked about a thing. So take whatever ordeals and thoughts you currently have and just throw them out the window because they're just not true. You bring up a good point with Magolor Epilogue, because I see in some add-ons that they've kind of like, are featured here in the experience that people have. And I guess this had, in a way, like Kirby fans just kind of drooling at their feet. It says here that Magolor has... Excuse me, show it again, please. Magolor can now open doors, and the ordeal doors and special challenges await Magolor behind every ordeal door. Once Magolor abilities reach a certain door required level, it will open.
I think he was first playable in Star Allies, and for a while we considered his appearance there non-canon because, again, we thought Magolor had officially died at that point, but apparently he had made a cameo in another Kirby game, which the name of it escapes me at the moment, but the ending of Magolor's Epilogue, whenever he actually makes it back to Kirby's world, establishes that, yeah, his cameo there is actually canonical. So Magolor, in fact, did come back to life.
And they lived happily ever after.
I'm not so sure Kirby's happy with that, but,
Yeah.
You can't kill off a fan favorite character like Magalore.
And I know this isn't related to remakes, but I gotta say, this is like an embarrassing moment to me. It's just kind of like a little gag I wanted to add in at some point. I didn't think that you would go into Kirby, but since you did, I wanted to share like an embarrassing childhood moment that I had. It's not just Kirby, it's also like Smash Bros. Melee, but the tree, man. The tree, like, blowing us back and forth on the stage, it kind of got in the way, and I was actually afraid of that tree. And, I want to say, I can't remember which. I think it was Game Boy Advance.
You were afraid of Wispy?
I was afraid of Wispy. Like, when I was, like, I was a baby little 7-year-old little saw plays back in the prime time. I was just a lad. But I was afraid of Wispy. Like, it reminded me back of Tracy Tree from the Rainforest Cafe from Disney World. For one, it was expensive to eat there, and two, I would refuse to walk back to the shop and visit Tracy Tree. People were just, petrified of that exhibit. So, speaking of Kirby, it was just a bad experience that I had when I was 7.
Yeah, this is the first time I'm hearing of any of this.
Well, now you know. Now you can just share it with your friends. Actually, don't do it. It's kind of embarrassing, but still. But yeah, it's...
All right, well, I guess we can move on from Kirby.